Greetings and welcome to Vocatio Talks. This is a 30-minute webinar where we will attempt to explore the connection between our work and our faith. I am Dr. Ben Reese, and I serve as the Associate Dean for Vocational Formation at ACU Dallas, along with directing ACU Center for Vocational Formation. And I am deeply grateful that you've chosen to spend your time with us. So I have 3 teenage children. My oldest, Emma, is 19 and a freshman in college. My son, Aiden, is 16 and a junior in high school. And my youngest, Izzy, she is 14 and a freshman in high school. They are funny, they are courageous, they're thoughtful kids, and I generally could not be more proud. I love the people they have become and are becoming. They're great. But here's the thing. They are never wrong. Our home is filled with constant disagreements as they make claims about this thing or that thing. And if anyone disagrees with them, especially one of their siblings, they will double down on their stance. They will dig their heels in and come hell or high water, they're going to be right. And there are times when our children will make statements they're convinced that are true. And I find myself taking in a deep breath and finding the kindest and most thoughtful way to say, I don't know if that's actually the case. And for all the trouble that I give my kids about the ways that they've become entrenched in their own ideologies or narratives or version of events or things that they've read on the internet, here's the really unfortunate thing. I'm not much better than them. Teenagers do not hold a monopoly on our instinct to dig our heels into a position and not give those with whom we disagree an inch, right? Adults are not much better. My wife has been pointing out the shower in our master bathroom has been slow to drain for a while. And I haven't done anything about it because that hasn't been my experience. Sure, there have been times I felt like it may have been a little slow, but generally speaking, I thought it was working perfectly. And just this past Saturday, she asked me if I'd be willing to troubleshoot the slow drain. And I said, babe, I don't know what you're talking about. Like the drain has not been slow for me at all. She said, what? I mean, every shower I've taken in the last month and a half, it's backed up and I'm standing in an inch of water at the end of it. I said, no, that's not true. You're exaggerating. I promise you, there's nothing. To which she replied, okay, take off the drain cover and see what we find. I said, fine, I will. So I went to the garage, I got a screwdriver, and I took off the cover of our drain. And lo and behold, can you imagine what I found? It was what looked like a small cat clogging the drain. Like 3 pounds of hair that had built up, as it does in any bath or shower, especially if you have people with long hair. But as I was cleaning it out and unclogging the drain and swallowing my pride, I began to wonder, am I that unobservant to fail to notice a drain that was this clogged? And even more importantly, do I have such little confidence in my wife's version of things and such overconfidence in my own experience to not give her the benefit of possibly being right? And when I took a shower later that evening, do you know what I noticed? Goodness, that drain really was clogged. I wasn't fully aware of how backed up it had been. And I know I'm not alone in this. The experience of discovering that we are wrong is a part of what it means to be human. We believe particular ideologies or events or memories with such certainty and clarity that the moment someone pushes back on us, we are more likely than not to dig our heels in, not give the disagreeing party space to possibly be right. And we do this knowing full well that there have been multiple times in our lives where we were convinced of some other thing to the same degree, only to discover that we in fact did not have all the pieces put together. We, in fact, were wrong. And yet, we have such short memories as the next moment rolls around and we think, okay, bring it on. I know I'm right on this one. And we don't have to look very far either to point to the damage that's done when we disagree and when we fail to consider the other party's viewpoint. How many fights have we witnessed in recent years regarding politics? How many disagreements have we seen play out on Twitter or on the news channels where political parties and their politicians dig their heels in, not giving any room to the so-called enemy on the other side of the issue? I mean, how many of us have anxiously walked into family gatherings over the holidays or birthday celebrations wondering if whatever current, very polarizing political issue will be discussed? And this is our family, right? Uncles and aunts that we love, mothers and fathers, and siblings, loved ones. We're often terrified to say what we think or hear what others might think. And if the history of the church shows us anything, It shows us that it's possible for two people who are thoughtful and kind and love Jesus and want the best for the world. It's possible that they can come out on two opposite sides of the spectrum on any given issue. It's possible for two people who love each other and love God and have the same scripture in front of them to read, be convinced of their interpretation, and be completely baffled that the other person does not see it from the same perspective. And too many times, the response to people with whom we disagree is to vilify them, to create boundaries on who is out and who is in, to make a very clear list about who is with us and who is against us. And the fragmentation and the conflict and the way that we make monsters out of people who are on the other side, it grows and it grows to the point where it becomes really hard, nearly impossible, in fact, to engage with those with whom we disagree or have different life experiences or have different convictions. And we become more and more siloed as we go back to our echo chambers to be with those who think like us and act like us and more often than not look like us. But I think there's an antidote to this illness, and it's called humility. And specifically, I want to talk about epistemic humility. So epistemology is the branch of philosophy that's concerned with the theory of knowledge. What is the nature of knowledge? What is the nature of belief? Epistemology wants to ask the question, how do we know what we know? So epistemic humility is holding that which we know loosely. Now, it's not suggesting we don't know anything or that we can't take a stand on anything. Epistemic humility is the ability to say, this is what I think about this thing. This is how I came to this certain understanding, but I'm going to hold it humbly because I might be wrong. Epistemic humility embraces the possibility that those things of which we are certain may have been influenced by a whole host of things we aren't even fully aware, and that our perspective and experience and viewpoint might actually, in fact, not be the whole picture. And I want to come at this from two different angles. The first is out of the work of a neuroscientist from the University of Southern California. His name is Antonio Damasio. And he's done groundbreaking work in the last 30 years on the connection between emotions and decision-making. And it grew out of working with patients who had lesions or experienced brain damage in that part of the brain that deals with emotions. These patients, all of whom still had fully functioning abilities to reason and to use logic, they still had that rational part of their brain. It was still good, but they essentially, because of the damage, didn't have emotions. And what Dr. Damasio noticed is that these patients all had one thing in common. They couldn't make decisions. When given the opportunity to decide between two or more things, they became paralyzed. They couldn't do it. Even the simple decision between whether to eat a chicken or steak dinner became nearly impossible. They had that part of the brain that we often attribute as necessary for decision making, right? The rational, reasoned, and logical ability to weigh two options and make the preferable choice. But what Dr. Damasio's research unveiled, and has since been further developed, is that we don't make decisions primarily from logic. We make them primarily from emotions, and then we find the logic that fits and supports our emotional response. Right? This is why two very smart and capable and caring and logical people can come to the same issue with the same data points and come up on completely opposite sides of the issue. The reason is that the point of decision making has more to do with their emotional worlds than it does their logical worlds. This is why simply giving people more data or more evidence, more points that we think will win them over, seldom if ever works. And so the first thing I want to say is this: epistemic humility, holding loosely that which we know, it matters in our homes and places of work and places of play and worship, because it recognizes that the things we are convinced of is not simply a product of facts or reason or logic. They're a product of a whole host of experiences, good and bad. They're a product of an emotional world that we're not entirely aware of much of the time. So this gives us the opportunity to say, I might be wrong about this. This might have to do more with my own emotional world than the logic that I think is so sound. It also allows us to be more gracious to those with whom we disagree, to recognize that all of us are incredibly complex, right? That the person or persons who are taking this strong stance against us have a whole host of experiences and emotions themselves that they bring to the table. Dr. Damasio's work elevates the importance of epistemic humility because what we know and how we know it isn't just about data points. It isn't just about the facts. But I also want to argue for the posture of epistemic humility from a theological perspective. So central to the story of both the Hebrew and Christian scriptures and central to the life and ministry of Jesus is this: the other, the one we don't understand or who stands on the other side of the boundaries that we create, the stranger among us who might not quite fit in the very person, the stranger among us who might not quite fit is the very person to whom we are called and upon whom we must rely. The practice of Christian hospitality is not simply about what we give, but it's about the space where two or more people can be fully themselves, right? To listen and to learn from one another, to depend on one another. Epistemic humility is a hospitable act where we say, even to those with whom we disagree, I don't have it all figured out, and I need you. I need your perspective just as you need mine. Just as I've been created in the image of God and have something to offer, so have you. Epistemic humility opens up space to the one thing we all know, and that is this: none of us have this thing called life figured out. So what if we held that which we're convinced of a little bit more loosely? This is not to say that we don't still believe it, and we don't stand firmly on issues that we care about and that we believe God cares about, issues that we think are important for the well-being and care of others. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I am suggesting is that underneath everything we fight for and argue about and hold dearly is this simple truth: we might be wrong, and that's okay, because we're not God, and God never expects us to be that. So when Jesus was asked by the lawyer in Matthew's gospel what the greatest commandment is, Jesus responds with, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second," he says, "is like it. Don't back down from any argument no matter what. You stand your ground on any issue at all costs." Okay, of course Jesus doesn't say this, right? What is the second command? Is this: love your neighbor as yourself. So the next time you find yourself in a situation at work or home or faith community or neighborhood, and you're confronted by someone with whom you don't understand or agree, be honest. Share what you think and believe and share why. Listen intently and listen with curiosity that they might have something to teach as well. And when you find yourself in a situation where you must choose between being right or being kind, choose to be kind. Because one day you might just remove the cover of the drain in your shower to discover that it is, in fact, pretty clogged.